December 20th, 1943. A shattered B-17 bomber limps across German airspace, tail nearly destroyed, crew wounded, one engine dead. A Luftwaffe Bf-109 fighter slides into formation beside it. The American pilot braces for the killing burst, but the German pilot doesn't fire. Instead, he escorts his enemy towards safety, risking court-martial and execution. This act of mercy between enemies became one of aviation history's most extraordinary stories, a moment when humanity transcended the machinery of total war. This is the true story of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown. Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown's aircraft was a Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress, the backbone of America's strategic bombing campaign. Official specifications reveal why it earned the name Fortress. Powered by 4 Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines producing 1,200 horsepower each, the B-17F cruised at 182 miles per hour at 25,000 feet with a maximum speed of 299 miles per hour. Combat radius, 800 miles with a 6,000-pound bomb load. Defensive armament consisted of 13 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns positioned to create overlapping fields of fire, waist guns, tail guns, ball turret, dorsal turret, and cheek guns. Crew of 10, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, and 4 gunners. But numbers don't capture what made the B-17 legendary. Boeing engineers designed redundancy into every system. Dual control cables, multiple wing spars, semi-monocoque fuselage construction that distributed structural loads across the airframe. Combat records document B-17s returning from missions with catastrophic damage that should have been fatal. On December 20th, Brown's bomber, nicknamed Ye Old Pub, would test these engineering limits to destruction. Oberleutnant Franz Stigler flew the Messerschmitt Bf-109G6, Germany's most produced fighter variant. Technical specifications show why Luftwaffe pilots called it the best dogfighter in their inventory. The Daimler-Benz DB605 engine produced one 465 horsepower with methanol water injection boost, driving a 3-blade variable pitch propeller. Maximum speed, 386 miles per hour at 22,170 feet. Service ceiling, 38,500 feet. The G6 variant mounted lethal armament, 120mm MG-151 cannon firings through the propeller hub, plus 2 13mm MG-31 machine guns synchronized to fire through the propeller arc. Additional underwing 20mm cannon pods could be fitted for bomber interception. This firepower could shred a B-17's aluminum skin in seconds. By December 1943, Stigler had 22 confirmed victories, just 3 short of earning the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest combat decoration. That damaged American bomber represented an easy 23rd kill. Tactical doctrine was explicit. Destroy all enemies. Bombers regardless of condition. Damaged bombers that reached England could be repaired and returned to bomb German cities. But Stigler's decision on December 20th would defy every tactical principle and risk everything he'd earned. The 379th Bomb Group's mission brief was straightforward. Strike the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory in Bremen, a critical German fighter production facility. The raid involved 357 B-17s from multiple bomb groups, a massive strike force designed to overwhelm German defenses through sheer numbers. But December weather made nothing simple. Solid cloud cover forced formations to navigate by instruments. P-47 Thunderbolt Escort fighters had to turn back at maximum range. Fuel limitations prevented them from accompanying bombers deep into Germany. That left the final approach unescorted. German radar stations detected the formation early. Luftwaffe fighter controllers scrambled every available aircraft. Flak batteries prepared for the altitude the bombers would fly. Brown's bomber flew in the formation's vulnerable position, lower element, exposed to fighter attacks from below. As they approached Bremen, the sky exploded. 88mm flak shells detonated at precisely their altitude, creating lethal shrapnel clouds. Then the fighters hit. BIF-109s and FW-190s dove through the formation in coordinated attacks. The tactical situation became desperate within minutes. A 20mm cannon shell exploded in Brown's No. 2 engine. Another burst shattered the nose plexiglass. Bombardier wounded. Navigator hit. Then a BF-109 made a perfect stern attack, raking the bomber's tail section. The tail gunner was killed instantly, his position destroyed. With 3 engines damaged, massive structural damage, and half the crew casualties, Olde pub couldn't maintain formation. Brown faced the bomber pilot's nightmare, falling out of the protective formation. In aerial combat, formation discipline meant survival. The combat box created interlocking fields of defensive fire. Attack one bomber, and you faced guns from 6 others. But a lone bomber was defenseless prey. Brown had no choice. The aircraft descended through 20,000 feet, then 15,000, engines screaming. Airspeed indicators fluctuated wildly, damaged pitot tubes providing false readings. The rudder barely responded, control cables severed by cannon fire. Through torn metal in the fuselage, crew members could see ground below. This violated every survival instinct bomber crews developed. They needed altitude for safety, for bailout time, for escape. But Brown couldn't maintain altitude. Aerodynamic principles were working against him. The shattered tail created massive drag. Missing control surfaces destroyed stability. Asymmetric thrust from failed engines required constant correction. Here's where physics comes into play. Every aircraft has a minimum control speed. Below that speed, control authority disappears. Brown was approaching that threshold. At 5,000 feet, barely above German flak range, the bomber leveled off. They were still flying, but for how long? Franz Stigler wasn't a typical Nazi warrior, though this distinction is crucial to understand. Born in 1915, he trained as a commercial airline pilot in the 1930s, flying passengers across Africa and the Mediterranean for Lufthansa. His flight instructor was a World War I fighter ace who taught him more than aviation technique. The instructor's philosophy: aerial combat is a test of skill between professionals, not personal hatred. When your opponent is defenseless, parachuting, crash-landed, crippled, you do not shoot. This code seemed outdated by 1943 standards. Total war had erased such niceties. Strategic bombing targeted civilians. Submarine warfare showed no mercy to survivors. But Stigler's instructor made him memorize the principle. Aviation historians note this warrior code had deep roots in fighter pilot culture. German aces like Oswald Boelke formalized it in World War I. British pilots respected it. But by World War II's industrial-scale warfare, such honor seemed naive. Stigler joined the Luftwaffe in 1940 and flew first in North Africa, then transferred to defense of the Reich operations against American bomber streams. He was a skilled pilot and effective killer. 22 confirmed victories proved his lethality. But he'd never forgotten his instructor's words. On December 20th, those words would be tested against everything military doctrine demanded: After engaging bombers at altitude and landing to refuel, Stigler took off again when controllers radioed about a lone crippled B-17 at low altitude. Easy target. Easy kill. He spotted it immediately, barely 1,000 feet above ground, struggling to stay airborne. Stigler armed his weapons and maneuvered for the killing pass. Then he pulled alongside. What he saw changed everything. The bomber's tail section was shredded, control surfaces nearly gone, structural frames exposed like broken bones. Through massive holes in the fuselage, he could see inside. Wounded crew members. The waist gunner slumped at his position, another crewman trying to help wounded comrades. The tail gunner's position destroyed. Brown in the cockpit, fighting controls desperately. Stigler pulled closer, flying mere feet from the bomber's wing. He could see Brown's face, young, exhausted, terrified. Their eyes met through the cockpit glass. In that moment, Stigler faced a choice that would define him. His instructor's voice: "You fight machines, not men. When your enemy is defenseless, you do not shoot." But Luftwaffe doctrine was explicit. Destroy all bombers. These men had just bombed German cities. They would do it again if they survived. Tactically, shooting was correct. But looking at those wounded boys in that flying wreck, Stigler couldn't pull the trigger. This wasn't combat. It would be murder. Stigler made his decision. He would escort the bomber to safety. He positioned his Bf-109 on the B-17's wing, not in attack position, but in protective formation. He gestured to Brown through the canopy. "Fly towards Sweden, neutral territory." Brown, confused and terrified, kept heading west, toward England, toward home. Stigler stayed with him. This created an extraordinary tactical deception. German anti-aircraft batteries along the coast saw a Luftwaffe fighter escorting what appeared to be a captured American bomber, not uncommon when Germans test flew captured aircraft. The gunners held fire, unwilling to risk hitting their own fighter. Stigler was deliberately shielding the bomber using his own aircraft's identity. For 30 minutes, he flew formation with Olde pub as it limped across German-occupied territory. He waved off other Luftwaffe fighters that approached, signaling the bomber was under control. Aviation historians recognize this as one of the war's most remarkable examples of individual moral courage overriding military doctrine. What would you have done in Stigler's position? Facing court-martial if discovered, sacrificing a kill toward the Knight's Cross, letting enemies escape who might bomb again? Would you have followed orders or followed conscience? Comment your decision below. As they reached the North Sea coast, the boundary between German-held territory and escape, Stigler knew he could go no further. Crossing into Allied airspace meant certain death from British fighters or anti-aircraft fire. He pulled up alongside Brown one final time. The two pilots locked eyes again. Stigler raised his hand in salute, a gesture of respect between warriors. Then he rolled his Bf-109 away and disappeared into the clouds. Brown watched him go, still not fully comprehending what had happened. Had a German fighter pilot just saved his life? It seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. They'd crossed German territory unmolested, shielded by that Bf-109's presence. Now came the final test. Crossing 250 miles of North Sea in a dying aircraft. With fuel leaking, engines failing, and the airframe barely controllable, Brown had to get his crew home. He kept the bomber at wave-top height. No altitude to bail out. No safety margin. Just determination. After an agonizing hour, the English coast appeared. He aimed for RAF Seething, crash-landing the bomber on the first runway he saw. When the crew evacuated and examined the damage, they counted over 400 bullet and shrapnel holes. Structural engineers later declared the aircraft unflyable, yet it had flown. Stigler landed at Jever Airfield and filed a routine combat report. Engaged enemy bombers. Mechanical difficulties prevented successful engagement. He told no one except his commanding officer, who gave him stark advice. Never speak of this. If higher command learns you let an enemy bomber escape, you'll be court-martialed and shot. The warning wasn't hyperbole. By late 1943, Luftwaffe discipline was brutal. Pilots had been executed for lesser infractions than deliberately sparing an enemy. Stigler kept his secret for 46 years. He continued flying combat missions, eventually earning his Knight's Cross with 28 victories. But the memory of December 20th stayed with him. After the war, Stigler immigrated to Canada, settling in Vancouver, where he worked as an aerospace technician. He never spoke publicly about his combat service. The burden of what he'd witnessed, the destruction, the killing, the moral compromises of total war, was too heavy. But one memory stood out. The day he'd chosen mercy over orders, humanity over hatred. That decision, more than any victory, defined who he truly was. Charlie Brown told intelligence officers about the German fighter that escorted them. They didn't believe him. The story defied everything they knew about Luftwaffe tactics. Some suspected Brown was covering for tactical errors. Others thought combat stress had caused hallucination. He was ordered to remain silent. The story could be enemy disinformation or psychological warfare. Brown obeyed and didn't speak about it for decades. He completed his bomber tour, survived the war, and returned to West Virginia. But the German pilot's face haunted him. Who was he? Why did he spare them? Brown had no answers. No name, no unit, no way to investigate. Post-war record searches proved impossible. Thousands of Luftwaffe pilots flew that day. Without a name, the mystery was unsolvable. Years became decades. Brown married, raised a family, worked as a U.S. State Department Foreign Service officer, but he never forgot December 20th, 1943, or the enemy who became his savior. That debt remained, unpaid, that mystery unsolved. Until 1986, when Brown decided to find him. In 1986, Brown began writing letters. He contacted Luftwaffe veteran organizations, posted inquiries in military history journals, reached out to German fighter pilot associations. His message was simple. I'm searching for the German pilot who on December 20th, 1943, escorted my crippled B-17 to the North Sea instead of shooting us down. Most responses were skeptical. Some suggested he was mistaken about the date or location. Others doubted the story entirely. But Brown persisted, providing specific details. The time, the altitude, the location, Stigler's hand signals, the salute. Aviation historians found the account compelling but unverified. Then, in late 1989, Brown's letter reached Franz Stigler in Vancouver, Canada. Stigler read it and was stunned. After 46 years of silence, the American pilot he'd spared was searching for him. He wrote back, providing details only someone who'd been there could know. The bomber's tail damage, Brown's desperate control inputs, the specific hand gestures he'd made. When Brown received Stigler's response in January 1990, He knew immediately it was authentic. They arranged to meet in Seattle later that year. The reunion would close a circle that had been open for nearly half a century. June 1990. Seattle. Two elderly men, one American, one German, both in their late 60s, met face-to-face for the first time since that December day in 1943. When they saw each other, both broke down. Recognition was immediate, though they'd only glimpsed each other briefly through cockpit glass 47 years earlier. They embraced. Brown said, "I've spent half my life looking for you." Stigler replied, "And I've spent my whole life wondering if you made it home." For hours, they reconstructed that day, filling in gaps from each other's perspectives. Brown described the terror of seeing the Bf-109 pull alongside, expecting death. Stigler explained his decision, the code his instructor taught him, seeing the wounded crew, knowing they were defenseless. They discussed the technical details, how Stigler had positioned to shield them from ground fire, how Brown had fought the shattered controls. They compared their post-war lives. Both had immigrated. Both had kept the secret for decades. Both had carried the same memory. Something profound emerged from that conversation. Despite flying for opposing nations in history's most destructive war, both men shared identical values: honor, mercy, the recognition that humanity matters even in combat. They became close friends, spending time together regularly, appearing at aviation history events, and eventually collaborating on a book titled A Higher Call that told their story. Until their deaths in 2008, Stigler in March, Brown in November, just 8 months apart, they remained like brothers. Technical analysis reveals why Olde Pub survived damage that should have been fatal. Boeing's engineering philosophy prioritized redundancy and structural distribution. The B-17's fuselage used semi-monocoque construction. The aluminum skin shared load-bearing responsibility with internal frames. Damage to one section didn't collapse the entire structure. Control systems featured dual cables. When primary tail control cables were severed, backup cables provided limited authority. The wing incorporated multiple spars running spanwise. Even with significant battle damage, the wing maintained structural integrity and lift generation. 4-engine redundancy meant losing 1 or 2 engines still provided minimum power. Official Boeing data documents B-17s returning from combat with extraordinary damage, wings with 5-foot holes, entire tail sections nearly severed, fuselages riddled with hundreds of hits. The aircraft's survivability wasn't luck. It was engineered resilience that saved thousands of airmen's lives. Brown's crew survival combined this engineering excellence with exceptional piloting skill and one German pilot's mercy. Remove any element, and Olde Pub becomes another lost statistic. Stigler's decision must be understood within the context of total war in 1943. By December, strategic bombing had killed tens of thousands of German civilians. Cities were being systematically destroyed. The Luftwaffe faced immense pressure to stop the bomber streams at any cost. Some German pilots resorted to desperate tactics, ramming bombers when ammunition ran out, continuing attacks while wounded. The psychological burden was crushing. Every bomber that got through meant more death and destruction. Against this backdrop, sparing an enemy bomber wasn't just disobeying orders. It was prioritizing personal honor over national survival. Yet Stigler did it anyway. Military historians note similar incidents occurred but were rarely documented. The warrior code, mercy toward defenseless opponents, survived even in industrialized warfare, though it became increasingly rare. Stigler's choice demonstrates that individual moral agency persists even in systems designed to eliminate it. Orders, doctrine, and propaganda couldn't override what he saw as fundamentally right. These men were defeated, defenseless, and dying. Killing them would be murder, not combat. That he risked execution to honor this principle makes his decision even more extraordinary. The Stigler-Brown encounter has become aviation history's most famous example of mercy in combat. But what does it teach us? First, that individual moral agency exists even in total war. Systems and orders can't completely override personal conscience. Second, that honor codes between warriors transcend nationality and propaganda. Stigler and Brown shared more values with each other than with their respective war machines. Third, that engineering and humanity intersect in aviation. The B-17's robust design enabled survival, but human mercy completed it. Their story has been taught at military academies as an ethics case study. It demonstrates that even in history's most destructive conflict, humanity persisted in individual choices. Both men spoke about this in later interviews. Stigler said, "To me, it was as if I had seen a bloody falling comrade. You don't shoot him, you help him." Brown said, "He saved our lives. But more than that, he showed that even in war, decency survives." Their friendship proved that former enemies can find common ground in shared humanity. That legacy matters as much as any technical specification or tactical analysis. In 2012, aviation historian Adam Makos published A Higher Call, an incredible true story of combat and chivalry in the war-torn skies of World War II. The book, based on extensive interviews with both Brown and Stigler before their deaths, became an international bestseller and is considered one of the finest WW2 aviation accounts ever written. Makos spent years researching, interviewing the men repeatedly, verifying details through combat records and historical archives. The title comes from Stigler's explanation of his decision. "I had to listen to a higher call, my own conscience." Brown and Stigler both participated in the book's creation, providing technical details, personal insights, and emotional context. Museum archives document that the story is thoroughly verified. Official mission records confirm Olde pub's damage and miraculous survival. Luftwaffe records verify Stigler's service on that date and location, and technical analysis confirms the plausibility of every detail. For those wanting deeper understanding of this extraordinary encounter, A Higher Call is essential reading. It expands far beyond what any documentary can cover. Franz Stigler died on March 22, 2008, at age 92 in Vancouver, Canada. Charlie Brown died on November 24, 2008, at age 87 in Seattle, Washington, just 8 months later. Their families noted that both men seemed at peace in their final years, having finally shared the secret that had defined their lives. They'd found each other, told their story, and proved that even in humanity's darkest chapter, individual choices for good still mattered. Their deaths marked the end of an extraordinary friendship between former enemies who became brothers. Aviation museums now display their story as testament to honor in combat. Every year, the encounter is taught to new generations of military pilots as an ethics case study. Their legacy endures not just in aviation history, but in the broader human story, that mercy, honor, and humanity can survive even total war. So the question remains, what would you have done? Imagine you're Stigler. Your 3 kills from the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest decoration that would secure your reputation and family's future. This crippled bomber is an easy victory. Doctrine orders you to shoot. Your nation is being destroyed by bombers like this one. Letting it go means it might return to bomb German cities again. If anyone discovers you spared an enemy, you'll be court-martialed and executed. But you see wounded boys in that wreck. They're defenseless, defeated, no threat. Your instructor's voice: when an enemy is defenseless, you do not shoot. Orders versus conscience, career versus code, national survival versus personal honor. What would you choose? Comment your honest answer below. There's no simple solution. That's what makes this story so powerful. Stigler chose mercy despite extraordinary pressure to choose violence. That choice cost him nothing materially, but earned him everything morally. And 47 years later, it earned him a brother. Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown's encounter proves that individual moral choices matter, even when systems and orders try to eliminate individual agency. One German pilot's decision to follow his conscience instead of doctrine saved 10 American lives and created one of history's most powerful examples of honor in warfare. Their reunion decades later demonstrated that humanity can transcend the hatred that war generates. Technical specifications matter. Tactical analysis matters. But sometimes, the most important aviation story isn't about the machines, it's about the human beings flying them. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe to The Pilot Historian for more aviation history that honors all who served. Share this video. This story deserves to be remembered. And comment, which aviation story should we cover next? Until next time, remember, honor matters, mercy matters, and sometimes following your conscience is the bravest thing you can do.